What kind of father are you? You can't even afford a house. My daughter Mara laughed, and her husband Kellen snorted as he poured himself more wine. Everyone at the table fell silent, but I just smiled. Their words cut like a knife. I had given everything so they could live in comfort. I left the restaurant without a scene, but a plan was already taking shape. 3 months later, I returned as the new owner of their building. The rent skyrocketed. They thought they'd ruined me. They were wrong. The restaurant hummed with the clatter of plates and the low swell of voices, but the air at our table felt like a storm about to break. Pendant lamps cast soft shadows across the white tablecloth, and the scent of grilled steak lingered, though my plate sat untouched. Across from me, Mara leaned forward, her designer dress catching the light, manicured nails tapping the stem of her glass. Kellen lounged beside her, blazer unbuttoned, a smirk playing on his lips as he swirled his Merlot. "You're not eating, Dad," Mara said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "What's wrong? Can't afford the menu." The table, cousins, an aunt, and a handful of Kellen's business friends went quiet. Someone coughed. A fork scraped porcelain. Kellen snorted, loud and deliberate, topping off his wine. "Maybe we should have picked a cheaper place for Graham's sake." The words landed like a slap, but I didn't flinch. My hands rested on the table. The fork in my right hand was cool against my palm. I squeezed it just enough to feel the metal press my skin. Mara's eyes, so much like her mother's, gleamed with something mean. She leaned closer, voice dropping to a hiss. "You've never been a real father. Just a burden. Always scraping by. Always embarrassing us." The room seemed to shrink. The clink of glasses faded until all I could hear was my own pulse. Kellen chuckled and murmured to the guy next to him, "Poor old Graham. Maybe a shelter's more his speed." A few nervous laughs rippled around the table, but no one met my eyes. I could have shouted. I could have reminded them how I paid for Mara's education, her wedding, their fancy apartment, how I shelved my own dreams so they could play at being successful. But I didn't. I smiled, a tight, controlled curve that felt more like a blade than a gesture. "You done?" I asked, my voice low and steady. Mara rolled her eyes, tossing her hair. "Oh, please, don't make a scene." Kellen raised his glass in a mock toast. "To Graham, the king of nothing. Sit down. Don't ruin the night." My chair scraped the hardwood as I stood. The sound sliced through the chatter. My old sweater felt heavy, and the weight of their stares felt heavier. I took my jacket from the back of the chair, the fabric brushing my knuckles like a reminder of who I was, not their punching bag. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, locking eyes with Mara. Hers were defiant, unyielding. Kellen just laughed and turned to charm the guest beside him. I walked out, steps measured. The restaurant's warmth gave way to the bite of an early December night. The door swung shut behind me, muffling their voices. My breath clouded in the air, and the streetlights flickered, casting long shadows on damp pavement. Their words echoed in my head, each one a spark igniting something I'd buried for years. I didn't look back. My hands slipped into my pockets, fingers brushing my phone. A plan was forming, hazy, but sharp at the edges, like a blade being honed. They thought they knew me, thought they'd broken me. They didn't know a thing. The streets of Riverton were quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. My shoes crunched on stray leaves, and the cold stung my face, but I barely noticed. A street lamp's glow caught a puddle, and I paused. My reflection warped in the water. My phone was in my hand before I realized it, the screen lighting with a photo of Mara, 7 years old, gap-toothed, holding a daisy. My thumb hovered over the image and the memories rushed back, uninvited. 18 years earlier, I'd sat in a bank, the air thick with ink and paper. The loan officer's pen scratched as I signed for Mara's education fund. My tie was too tight, my shoulders ached from a double shift, but I smiled. She'd be the first in our family with a degree. I saw her future, bright, boundless. I didn't see the cost to mine. The memory shifted to about 11 years ago, Mara's wedding. The venue was a blur of pale flowers and clinking glasses. She glowed in her dress, a vision paid for by the last of my savings. I'd wanted to travel someday, see the Silver Crest Range, maybe, but that dream dissolved in the rustle of her veil. She hugged me that day, her perfume sharp and sweet. "You're the best, Dad," she said. And I believed her. Nearly 6 years back, Kellen's cafe smelled like fresh coffee and borrowed ambition. He shook my hand, gripped too tight, promises too slick. "This will change everything, Graham. You'll see." I handed over the last of my retirement fund to help him open the place. He called it a loan, then never mentioned it again. I blinked, and the street came back into focus. My house stood ahead, a squat shingled box in a row of near twins. The porch light flickered as I climbed the steps, the key cold in my hand. Inside, the air was stale, the couch creaked under my weight. A photo of Mara sat on the shelf, her smile frozen in time. Beside it, old papers, bills, receipts, reminders of what I'd given up. I pulled a yellowed check from the stack, ink faded but legible, payment for Mara's tuition in my careful hand. My fingers tightened, crumpling the edge. She'd stopped calling after the wedding, a Christmas card now and then, maybe. Kellen's cafe thrived, but my name was never on the lease, never in the story they told. The kitchen clock ticked each second louder than the last. I set the check down, my hands steady now. The ache in my chest remained, but something else was growing hard, unyielding. I looked at Mara's photo again, her eyes bright with the future I'd built. Mine were different now, colder. I wasn't their fool anymore. Tomorrow would change. Morning light sliced through the blinds of my office, a cramped room that smelled of coffee and dust. Papers sprawled across the desk, old contracts, invoices, a life in receipts. I sat with a mug of black coffee, steam curling upward, and opened my notebook to a fresh page. A pair of names stared back at me, Mara. Kellen. My pen hovered, then pressed hard, ink bleeding into the paper. I wasn't broke, not yet. Years as a construction manager had left me with enough, modest savings, a few contacts who still owed favors. But I'd lived lean, pouring everything into them. Mara's education, Kellen's business, their apartment. My fingers tightened around the mug, the heat grounding me. No more. The phone rang once before Frank picked up, his voice gravelly from years of cigars. "Graham? It's early. You okay?" "I need advice," I said, leaning back as the springs groaned. "About Kellen's business." A pause. "You sure about this?" "Stirring up trouble with your daughter's husband. That's a deep cut." They stirred first. My voice was flat, even as my pulse quickened. "What do you know about his cafes?" Frank sighed. "He's leveraged to the hilt, loans, bad deals. Word is he's missed payments." "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "Maybe." I jotted a note. Debts, lenders, who's he owe? "Start with Midvale Bank," Frank said. "Guy there, Tom Reese, might talk." "But, Graham, this could torch the bridge with Mara. Let it burn." I hung up, eyes on the notebook. The plan was taking shape, rough but real. I opened my laptop. The screen's glow was harsh in the dim room. Mara's social media was a parade of excess, getaways, designer bags, captions about living the dream. Kellen's posts were worse, tailored suits, toasts at his latest opening. I scrolled jaw tight. They'd built their image on my sacrifices, then laughed in my face. A call to an old client confirmed Frank's hint. Kellen's cafes were bleeding cash. A single ugly week could sink him. I wrote another line beneath the debt, risky but possible. I still had enough pull to make it work. The office felt smaller, walls closing in with possibility. I stood, pacing. The floorboards creaked under my boots. Sleeves rolled, coffee gone cold. Each step felt like a decision, each note like a blade. They'd underestimated me, thought I'd fade quietly. I grabbed my coat and the notebook, its pages heavy with intent. The bank was a short drive away, and Tom resowed me a favor. I stepped outside into the sharp morning air, the city waking around me. My strides were long, purposeful. I knew where to hit them, and I wasn't waiting. The Riverton wind bit at my knuckles, carrying rain and exhaust. The bank sat a dozen blocks away, its glass facade glinting in gray light. My pace was steady, my pulse steadier. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Inside, the bank smelled of polished wood and money. The hum of a printer blended with soft keyboard clacks. Janet, an old colleague from my construction days, sat behind a desk, glasses low on her nose. She smiled when she saw me, then narrowed her eyes, sensing purpose. "Graham Pike," she said, leaning back. "What brings you here?" "Information," I said, sliding into the chair opposite. My voice was calm, but my fingers tapped the notebook in my pocket. "About Kellen, his cafes." Janet raised an eyebrow, then glanced at her screen. "You're not one for small talk anymore, are you?" Her nails clicked against the keys. "Kellen's in deep. 3 of his cafes are behind on payments. Midvale's ready to call in the loans." She paused, meeting my gaze. "And Mara? She's got her own mess. Took out a loan for that boutique of hers, barely covering interest." I nodded, jotting a note. "Debt's vulnerable." "How bad is it?" "Bad enough," Janet said. "Kellen's juggling creditors like a circus act. Mara's worse, bleeding cash on inventory she can't move." She leaned closer, voice dropping. "Why the interest, Graham? This about family?" I smiled thin, sharp. "Just curious." "Banks." I stood, chair scraping softly. She didn't press, but her eyes followed me out. Next stop, Kellen's flagship cafe, a sleek spot downtown. I pushed through the door, the bell jangling. The air smelled of burnt coffee and neglect. Half the tables were empty, staff drifting like shadows. A cracked sign above the counter read, "Pike and Brew." Kellen was in the back, voice sharp as he argued on the phone. "You can't cut me off now, I'll have the money." His shirt was wrinkled, hair unkempt. I ordered a coffee, paid in cash, and sat near the window unnoticed. The cup was cold by the time I left, but my notebook was heavier, empty seats, angry suppliers. Back home, the glow of my laptop lit the dim kitchen. Mara's social media was a gallery of excess, her in a silk scarf on a yacht, a leather bag slung over her shoulder. The caption screamed success, but the comments told another story. "Where's my order?" 3 weeks late. Her boutique was crumbling under complaints. I wrote, "Vanity, her weakness." The clock ticked past midnight, my coffee long gone cold. I leaned back, the chair creaking. Their pride was my opening. Their debts, my leverage. I pulled out my phone and dialed an old partner, a man who knew how to move money quietly. The line rang as rain began to patter against the window, each drop a promise of what was coming. I signed the papers, and Kellen's debts became mine. The investor's office was glass and steel, air-heavy with leather and ink. My pen moved smoothly, each stroke a step toward their unraveling. The investor, Kessler, bald and sharp-eyed, slid the contract back across the desk. "Done," he said, voice clipped. "You sure about this, Pike?" "Risky play." I met his gaze, expression unyielding. "It's just the start." I folded the agreement into my coat. Below, Riverton skyline cut the dusk. I left without another word. The move was clean, buried under a shell company Kessler had built. Kellen wouldn't see my name, only the letter that landed on his desk the next day, payment due in 30 days. By noon, I was parked across from his cafe, the same one I'd scouted. A crooked technical difficulties sign hung on the door. Through the window, Kellen paced, barking into his phone. A delivery truck pulled away empty. I allowed myself a small smile. At home, I spread the documents across the kitchen table, lamp casting harsh light. The numbers were clear. Kellen's cafe was bleeding. My purchase of his debt gave me the right to demand repayment, knowing he couldn't deliver. That letter in his hands was my first move. A quiet, precise cut. I leaned back, the chair groaning. Mara's face flashed in my mind, the smile from that old photo in my drawer. Was I going too far? She had stood by him, laughed as they humiliated me. But she was still my daughter. The thought lingered heavy until I shoved it aside. This wasn't about her. Not yet. This was about justice. The phone rang, an unknown number. I picked up, voice steady. "Yes, it's Jones," Kellen snapped. Words rushed. "This creditor nonsense. Who's behind it?" "You know something, don't you, Graham?" His panic was almost sweet, a crack in his polished mask. I leaned against the counter, the letter in my hand. "Sounds like you're in trouble, Kellen. Maybe you should have been more careful." I let the words hang, calm, almost amused. He cursed, demanding answers. I hung up. My pulse was steady. The rain outside had stopped, leaving only the drip of the faucet. I set the letter down, its edges crisp, and felt the weight of what I'd started. The phone still hummed in my ear with his echo frantic, cracking. The apartment was quiet, the creak of floorboards loud in the stillness. My hand lingered on the receiver, the plastic cool against my palm. Then came the knock. Sharp. Insistent. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Mara stormed in, her designer coat flapping like a flag of war. Kellen followed, jaw tight, reeking of cigarettes and desperation. The air shifted thick with their anger. Mara's eyes were red, her voice a blade. "You're pathetic, Dad. Stirring up trouble because you're jealous. You think you can ruin our lives?" I stood by the table, hands in my pockets, my face a mask. "I haven't done anything," I said, my tone even. "Sounds like you're digging your own graves." Kellen paced, fists clenched, blazer wrinkled. "Don't play innocent, old man," he growled. "You've been whining to someone, banks, creditors, who knows? You're trying to sink me." His voice cracked, fear bleeding through his bravado. Mara spun toward me, her heels striking the wood. "You've always hated our success," she spat. "Living in this dump, clinging to your sad little life. You're nothing, and you can't stand that we're everything you'll never be." Her words cut, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse in that restaurant. I stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. "You built your lives on my back," I said, voice low, steady. "And now you're shocked the ground is shaking." Mara laughed, sharp, bitter, and tossed her purse onto the couch. "You're delusional. Keep your conspiracies, Dad. You'll regret this." She turned to Kellen, who slammed his hand against the wall. The sound cracked through the small room. "Back off, Pike," he barked, pointing a trembling finger. "Or you'll wish you had." His threat was hollow, and we both knew it. I didn't move, didn't blink. "Careful, Kellen. You're not in control anymore." The words landed like stones. His face twitched. Mara grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the door. She paused, glaring back, then slammed it shut. The frame rattled, the echo lingering like a warning. Alone, I exhaled. My heart was steady, but my mind was racing. Their fear was real now, their cracks exposed. I crossed to the table, opened my notebook, its pages worn from use. My pen scratched across the paper, each word a step deeper into the plan. Outside, the city lights flickered through the window, pulsing like a heartbeat. My faint reflection stared back before I bent again to the page. Rain streaked the glass, scattering the glow of street lamps. At the kitchen table, my pencil carved lines into the notebook, each one another piece of the puzzle. Mara's venom, Kellen's empty threats, they echoed in my head but sharpened my focus. This wasn't anger. It was precision. I picked up the phone and dialed Ron, an old partner who'd navigated more real estate deals than I could count. His voice crackled through, gruff and wary. "Graham? It's late. What's this about?" "A building," I said, tone steady. "The one at 12th and Market. I want it quietly through a shell company." A long pause. "That's a big ask. Expensive, too. You sure you've got the capital? Make it happen. I'll cover it." I didn't elaborate. Ron didn't need to know the why, only the how. "All right," he said finally. "But this better not blow up in your face." The line went dead. I set the phone down, my fingers brushing the notebook. The address stared back at me, their building, their sanctuary. The next morning, I met with Carla, a lawyer, in a bustling downtown cafe. The hiss of espresso machines mingled with the clatter of cups. Papers spread across the table, their edges crisp under the cold light streaming in. Carla's pen hovered as she studied me, her eyes sharp. "This is an unusual request, Mr. Pike. A shell company for a single property. Discretion matters," I said, sliding a folder toward her. "Can you handle it?" She nodded, flipping through the documents. "It's doable. But why the rush?" Her tone was professional, but curiosity flickered. "Timing's everything." She didn't press. I didn't offer more. By the time I left, the deal was in motion. My signature was a vow written in ink. That evening, I walked to their building, a sleek tower of glass and steel in the heart of Riverton. The lobby gleamed, but a crack ran along one wall, a flaw no one noticed. I told the doorman I was checking utilities, an old construction trick. He waved me through. From the street, I caught a glimpse of their apartment, 3rd floor, corner unit. Behind the curtain, Mara's silhouette moved, her gesture sharp, arguing with Kellen. I turned away, breath visible in the chilly air. Back home, I paused at the shelf. Mara's childhood photo caught the lamplight, her 6-year-old smile, daisies in her hand. My chest tightened. Was this too far? She had laughed as they cut me down, but she was still my daughter. I set the photo face down. The ache faded beneath the weight of what they'd done. The notebook waited. I opened it. Wrote, "They're home." My leverage. The phone buzzed. A text from Carla, "Deal's moving. Papers ready soon." Then another message, Mara's name flashing on the screen. My thumb hovered. I didn't open it. Not yet. I slipped the phone into my pocket, her message unread. Its weight was a spark in my chest. She was rattled, and I knew why. The letter about the rent hike, tripled overnight, had landed. I stepped into the November air, sharp and cold, and headed toward Kellen's cafe. Not to enter, just to watch. The plan was moving, and I wanted to see the crack spread. The cafe was a ghost of itself. Windows dark. A crooked closed sign taped crookedly to the door. I leaned against a street lamp, the metal cold through my coat. Across the street, their apartment building loomed, its lights winking like watchful eyes. Days earlier, I'd hired a marketer, a quiet deal to boost a rival boutique online. Mara's store was bleeding customers now, her social media drowning in complaints, late orders, no refunds. Her empire of silk and selfies was crumbling. Inside their apartment, chaos reigned. I couldn't hear them, but I saw it through the window, Mara pacing, blouse untucked, arms flailing. Kellen slumped on the couch, a cigarette drooping from his fingers. A torn letter lay on the coffee table. The rent hike had hit like a fist. Mara's phone sailed across the room, shattering against the wall. I exhaled, breath clouding the air. Her control was slipping exactly as I'd planned. Earlier, I'd checked her page. Her latest post, a scarf posed just so, had 50 comments, all venom. Where's my dress? Scammer. I smiled then, the same way I did now. The marketer's ads were relentless, pushing her rival's sleek site into every corner of Riverton. Mara's vanity had built her brand. Now it was her noose. The city was quiet on my walk home, only the crunch of leaves under my boots. In my kitchen, the lamp flickered as I sat, table cluttered with notes. I pulled Mara's photo from the drawer, her young face, gap-toothed and smiling, a ghost of who she'd been. For a flicker, guilt pricked me. She was drowning, and I was the one pouring the water. But then I remembered her laugh in that restaurant, the way she called me nothing. The guilt drained, replaced by something colder. The phone rang, shattering the silence. Kellen's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice, then answered, my voice smooth. What is it? We need to talk, he said, words slurred, desperate. Tomorrow. Your place. Name the time. He was breaking, and he didn't even know I held the hammer. 8. Don't be late. I hung up. Thunder rolled outside, deep as a warning. The storm was coming, and they were caught in its path. Later that night, I found him in a dive bar, the air thick with stale beer and regret. He hunched over a whiskey, ranting to the bartender. It's not my fault, he slurred. They're out to get me. He didn't see me in the corner, sipping coffee, watching him unravel. The next morning, his cafe was a shell. Tables bare. The air thick with bleach and defeat. Kellen sat at the counter, blazer crumpled, a stack of unpaid bills beside him. The keys glinted under the harsh light, a symbol of what he'd lost. Graham, he said, standing, voice unsteady. You gotta help me. Talk to these people. Tell them I'm good for it. I crossed my arms, leaning against a table. You dug this hole, Kellen. Not me. Why should I clean up your mess? He slammed a fist on the counter, rattling the keys. Because you're family. You owe us. His desperation was pathetic, his charm gone. You owe me, I said, voice low. Everything you have, your cafes, your life, it's built on what I gave you. I stepped closer, shadow falling over him. And you threw it in my face. His mouth opened, then closed. His hand shook. The door swung open. A supplier hauled out the last espresso machine. Kellen didn't look, just slumped, shoulders heavy. Just talk to them, he muttered, tossing the keys onto the counter. They landed with a hollow clink. A surrender. I left without a word. The emptiness echoed behind me. At home, the phone rang. Ron's voice, brisk. "The building's nearly yours, Graham. Papers are finalizing." I nodded, though he couldn't see, my eyes on the notebook. The plan was almost complete. I spread the documents across the table, their weight a promise. Kellen's cafes, gone. Mara's boutique, failing. Soon, their home would be mine. The mailbox clattered. A thick envelope inside, the lawyer's seal crisp. I tore it open. The words were clear: property transfer complete. Lightning flashed, splitting the night sky, illuminating the paper in my hands. Tomorrow, they'd face the truth. The storm followed me as I left my apartment, coat damp, documents tucked inside, each page a blade. Their building waited, a tower of glass and lies, and I was ready to bring it down. The elevator hummed as I rode to their floor. My reflection in the mirror stared back, calm, unyielding. Their door stood ajar. Voices spilled out, sharp, frantic. I knocked once, hard. The voices stopped. Kellen yanked the door open, shirt untucked, eyes wild. "Graham," he rasped, voice breaking. "What the hell are you doing here?" I stepped inside without waiting. The apartment was wrecked, boxes half-packed, wine glasses scattered, a torn notice about the tripled rent pinned to a newspaper. Mara stood by the window, hair a mess, silk blouse stained with tears. "Dad," she whispered, voice small, childlike. I set the documents on the coffee table. The thud echoed in the silence. "Read," I said, my tone flat. Mara's hands trembled as she reached for the papers. Her eyes widened as she scanned the lines. Kellen leaned over, breath ragged, color draining from his face. You own the building?" Mara's voice cracked. "This is a mistake." "It has to be." "No mistake," I said, crossing my arms. "I bought it. Your rent's due. All of it, now." Kellen lunged forward, fists clenched. "You can't do this." "We'll fight it, you hear me." But his voice faltered, bravado crumbling like ash. He knew he had nothing left, no cafes, no leverage, no charm to save him. Mara sank onto the couch, sobbing. "Dad, please," she whispered, words choked. "I didn't mean it. Those things I said at the restaurant. Remember when you taught me to ride a bike? You were my hero." Her tears fell, but they didn't reach me. "Not anymore." "You called me nothing," I said, voice low, steady. "You both did. You built your lives on what I gave you and then spat in my face. This," I gestured to the documents, "is what you chose." Kellen grabbed my arm, his grip weak. "We'll fix it. Just give us time. We'll pay you back, I swear." His eyes begged. But I saw the man who mocked me, who laughed as I bled. I pulled free, stepping back. "You're out of time." I turned to the door. Their pleas followed me like echoes down the elevator shaft. The walls closed in, and for a moment, doubt flickered Mara's tears, her voice calling me Dad. I pressed it down, jaw tight. They'd made their bed. Outside, the wind howled, tugging at my coat. I pulled out my phone and typed a note, Fund for the Overlooked. The idea had been growing, a way to help people like me, who had given everything and been repaid with scorn. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, my steps firm against the wet pavement. At home, the chair creaked as I sat. A fresh mug of coffee steamed at my side. The storm had passed, leaving a quiet that settled deep in my bones. For the first time in years, I felt still, like a river finally finding its course. My notebook lay open. I wrote, "Fund for the sacrificed, for those who gave all and were forgotten." The words felt right. A purpose born from pain. I dialed Frink. His familiar rasp answered on the second ring. "Graham? You sound different. What's going on?" "I did it," I said, leaning back. The chair groaned. "They're done. And I'm starting something new. A fund for people like me, for those who gave everything and got nothing but grief." Frank let out a low whistle. "Hell, you don't mess around. You really pulled it off. After all they put you through." His voice held awe, and it warmed me like sunlight after a long winter. "Had to," I said. "For me. For others." We talked details, structure, goals, and by the time I hung up, the idea was solid. A beacon cutting through the fog of what I'd done. The next day, I walked to a small office I'd rented downtown. Morning light streamed through the windows. The air smelled of fresh paper and possibility. A consultant, Sarah, sat across from me, her laptop open. "Your fund's viable," she said, sliding a budget across the desk. "We can launch in a month if you keep the momentum." I nodded, signing the first forms. My pen was steady. "Let's make it happen." The act felt like planting a seed, one that could grow beyond me. As I left, a memory surfaced. Years ago, signing away my savings for Mara's wedding. I dreamed of the Silvercrest Range, of open skies and freedom. I'd let that dream go for her. Now I was free. The weight of her betrayal only sharpened my resolve. That evening, I wandered through a park near my house. The air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath my boots. Children laughed on the playground, their parents watching with quiet pride. I stopped, breath-catching. My fund would matter to someone's father, someone's sacrifice. It wasn't just revenge. It was redemption. Back home, the mailbox rattled. Inside, a single envelope, Mara's handwriting scrawled across it. My fingers traced the ink, but I didn't tear it open. Her words felt distant, like a language I no longer spoke. I tucked it into my pocket, the house waiting, its warmth promising rest. Later, I set the envelope on the table, wood creaking beneath my weight. Earlier that day, my neighbor Tom had caught me outside, his voice low with gossip. "Saw Mara and Kellen," he'd said, shaking his head. "Moved to some cramped place across town. No more fancy cars. Kellen's pushing papers at an office, and Mara shut her shop. Looked broken, both of them." I'd nodded, face blank. Inside, the news settled like a stone justice, cold and final. I slid the letter open, the paper rustling. Mara's words spilled out, apologies, memories of me braiding her hair, promises to change. "I'm sorry, Dad, I didn't see you. Please, let's talk." Her handwriting trembled, but it didn't move me. I'd heard her laughter in that restaurant, felt the sting of her scorn. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer beside old photos and faded checks. That chapter was closed. The next morning, I stood inside a bright community center, the air warm with the scent of coffee and new beginnings. My fund's first meeting buzzed around me, dozens of faces, some weary, some hopeful. I stepped to the podium, my voice steady. "This is for the overlooked," I said, my eyes sweeping the room. "For those who gave their all and were pushed aside. We see you. We're here." Applause rose soft at first, then building into a roar. I felt it in my chest, a purpose, a legacy. I left the center as dusk fell, the city alive with horns and laughter. The street stretched before me, lined with trees stripped bare by winter's touch. I walked with my hands in my pockets, a small smile tugging at my lips. Mara and Kellen were out there, rebuilding or breaking, but their story no longer tangled with mine. Their future was theirs to carry. The wind picked up, cool against my face. I tilted my head to the sky. The stars were faint, but steady above the city's glow. My steps echoed, each one a note in a song I was finally writing for myself. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. Subscribe to keep this conversation going.